Excuse me, now we're going to talk about the fuel system. The airplane has 5 fuel tanks. It's basically a flying gas station. We've got 2 main tanks, which I'm standing on right here. 2 main tanks, which I'm going to open up here in a second. And we have 2 auxiliary rear tanks, which are located aft of the wing. And we also have 1 nose tank, which is an 80-gallon nose tank. Some Beech 18s have a baggage compartment in the nose locker. This particular one, being on floats, they wanted maximum fuel, so it's got an 80-gallon nose tank. The minimum octane for the airplane is 80 octane. However, we run 100 low lead avgas, blue in color. The airplane burns about 25 gallons an hour per side, making up 50 gallons an hour in cruise. At altitudes, you lean it out, you could probably get it down to more like 40, but for the most part, for planning purposes, we go by 50 gallons an hour. The airplane has 2 engine-driven fuel pumps, and for redundancy, it has a wobble pump inside the cockpit, which I'll show you in just a little bit when we get in there and do the cockpit video. A wobble pump is just what it sounds like. It's a hand pump that you actually wobble back and forth, and it's a direct positive displacement pump. It could keep the engines running in the event of a failure of a mechanical engine-driven pump. Okay, now, as far as the fuel capacity of this airplane, total it holds about 280 gallons. It has 80 gallons in the nose tank. It has 75 gallons in each main tank, which is right here, and it has 25 gallons in each rear tank. When we're using the fuel system in flight, ideally we burn the nose tank off first to get all that weight off the nose. Then we switch to the rear tanks, burn the rear tanks off, and then at the last we go back to the main tanks where you know you have 75 gallons on each side, so that gives you another 3 hours in the mains. And we use the mains for takeoffs and landings. The nose tank and the auxiliary rear tank we primarily use in cruise flight. Okay, coming back to the fuel system, inside the cockpit we have our fuel selector valves in here. We have 4 locations: main tanks, rear tanks, and nose tanks. Takeoff and landing primarily on the main tanks. Now, whenever we change tanks, we always, if I was to have you change tanks from the mains to the nose, you would always want to switch down and around through the rear tank, like this, around this time. That way you're never in the off position. An improper way to do it would be to go pass through off on your way to the nose tank. And what could happen there is that maybe this valve was to break or something, then you would be stuck in the off position. So that's the fuel selector valves. Now, crossfeed procedure, for some reason the engineers decided to put the crossfeed valve underneath the co-pilot seat. It took me a while to figure that out when I first bought the airplane, but that's where it's located, right underneath here. So you want to make sure you check this to make sure that somebody, when they were getting in and out of the airplane, didn't possibly kick it or something. If it was not all the way in the off position, if you were slightly on, you would notice an imbalance in fuel burn. So you want to make sure that that crossfeed is off. Unless, of course, you're wanting to cross-feed. The airplane, like I said, has 2 engine-driven fuel pumps, and it has a wobble pump. This here is the wobble pump right here on the floorboard. So if you look here at the fuel pressures, as I'm pumping this back and forth, you'll notice those fuel pressures coming right on up. It doesn't take much. You probably pump it 3 or 4 times, and the engines would probably run for, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds before you'd probably have to pump it again. Just kind of keep that pressure built up. We use the wobble pump for starting the airplane and also emergency procedures. Something you want to check during an engine out procedure. You would want to check your fuel pressure and wobble the wobble pump to check that possibly maybe you lost an engine-driven fuel pump. The primer for the airplane is right here. You either select right or left, and then just pull like any primer and prime the engines. Usually it takes about 6 shots a piece for cold starting. You prime the airplane, and then you select the other side and prime the other side. And then ideally you want to end up with the primer positioned to whatever engine you're going to be starting first. That way, if the engine doesn't start right away, you're already selected here on your primer, and you could just simply pull it up and give it another shot of prime if necessary. As far as the fuel gauge, there's only one of those, and it's electric. I'm going to turn the master switch on here. All the way to the left would be off, as it's indicating 0. And then as it rotates around here clockwise, that would be the front left tank, the front right tank, the left rear tank, the right rear tank, and the nose tank. And of course, it's been sitting here for a while, so it is pretty empty.